Same answers every year.
Same
You
question
know,
as
yeah,
every.
you know as good as I do.
um, it seems like from your free, who are your free agents and who you have under contract, you have a lot more certainty in terms of front court. Does that? I know you always go best talent available. Does that factor in as a potential tiebreaker when it comes to who might be available wherever you're picking?
No, not really. I mean, it's a total cliche every year that it's best available, but there actually is something to that, just because of the uncertainty of rosters at any time. Free agency is just a part of that,
Yeah.
so it's really hard to make any decisions based on a current roster. So you can't deny talent when it's all said and done with the draft picks, because you never know what the team could look like 2 weeks later, a month later, 6 months later. Like, so you just kind of have to, you plan for what's the best decision long term. At least we do. What the best decision is for us long term, regardless of what our current roster situation is.
What's your overall view? I mean, everybody knows one. Everybody's somewhat familiar with two and three. What's your overall view of like the draft as a whole in terms of talent level?
It's actually quite deep. I think, yeah, everybody is, you know, kind of going nuts about the top of the draft, which is, it seems like as good as it's ever been, and we seem to be really comfortable with a lot of players in this draft. Though I think we like where we're at 13, and even we're getting a lot of offers or things coming across the table for picks all around the draft as well, and there seems to be at a number of different places in this draft there's players to be had. So it's a fairly deep draft, we feel like, and we're pretty happy with where we're sitting right now.
How has this year, without a coach for so long and now with a smaller assistant coaching staff, been different from years past as you go through this process?
Not all that different. I mean, we've had draft processes where our main team is still playing in the playoffs, and that coaching staff and that part of the organization can't really focus on the draft as much as the front office does. And so every year we really lean on the 905 staff to help run our draft workouts, and the coaching staff doesn't really have a ton of input on in terms of the actual draft process themselves. I mean, usually we like to have them around and watching and getting their take on the players that are working out, and this maybe more than years past that wasn't the case. But other than that, the actual running of the workouts and the main decision making that's going on in our room isn't really any different than normal.
And if the draft is far deeper, did you run a lot more guys through than you maybe normally would pick with 13?
Not really, mainly because not having a second round pick, it kind of limited the number of players that, a lot of it is agents that are sending their players to us. And so, we tried our hardest to get in a wide net of players for 13, but you know how it goes with, there's 20 players that think they're going to go in the top 10, and then there's another 20 players that don't think they would go at 13. So we're kind of right in that middle ground of trying to convince both directions of coming in and getting in front of us. And I thought we did a really good job of getting as many in as we could, but not having the second round pick, it kind of limited some of those, the deeper cut type players that usually we like to get in and get to know a little bit better.
How many guys would you count in? Obviously, we didn't get to know, but
Yeah, I'd say probably maybe like 20.
And Dan, on that note, I mean, it's been a while since you guys you've had a lottery pick, at least a lottery pick when you've been centered in Toronto. And so, did you approach the whole thing a little differently than you did? It's been like, I think, since 17, really, where players would come in, you might have a chance to meet them, or you let the world know that who was in town. I mean, has that been a decision by you guys to kind of play that a little more low key?
I wouldn't say it's any different for it being a lottery pick versus a late first or anything. I think it's kind of more of just, the more you think about it, it's just another advantage of not letting the teams around us know who we have coming through here. To be totally honest with you, just trying to keep a little bit of privacy in terms of what we're doing with that. And I think we kind of see it as those that within our organization that need to know it, and like everybody knows around here, and it's, I mean, it seems like a lot of the kids are probably putting it out on social media when they're coming anyway, so it's not like we're like holding them to secrecy or anything like that. It's just kind of more of a standard protocol of just, letting people know that if they need to know, sort of thing.
I was going to ask, do you think it works?
It doesn't really. I mean, it's not. In today's day and age, it's impossible to keep anything like that. But again, it's not like we're like hoping for secrecy of anything like that.
As far as how the game's been progressing over these past few years, what attributes do you think are harder now to get at the back end of the draft, and what attributes do you think are undervalued currently?
I mean, I think in the back end of the draft, it's probably just all around skill. It seems like in today's game, it seems like youth basketball is so much less focused on skill development. So generally, players that have a high level of skill usually rise up within the draft process, to where as you work your way through it, you're kind of taking shots on guys who maybe need that extra skill development here in the NBA versus coming in with that already. I think I wouldn't say anything has really changed in that regard. It does seem like the NBA in general it's getting younger as a league, and so I think a lot of the draft are more like kind of long-term project sort of players, as opposed to, in the past it seems like most of the second round were a lot of seniors and older players, to where nowadays a lot of those guys end up being the undrafted targets or the maybe the late second two-way level guys, to where you just kind of, it seems like draft picks are being used on more long-term project sort of players than in the past.
Do you think that benefits you guys having a larger development infrastructure? Maybe it's lasted a little bit longer with the 905 and all that kind of stuff?
I mean, I wouldn't say that we're ahead of any curve in terms of that, with considering other NBA teams. We've had a lot of success drafting seniors or older players that can come in and help now as well, who also develop into players themselves. So we're kind of just we're kind of all over the place in terms of the types of players that we go after. I don't think we consider ourselves as like a good landing spot for a certain type of player more so than anybody else.
How much consideration is there potentially moving up in the draft?
Quite a bit. I mean, we're kind of, our whole operation around the draft is to try to know all the pick, or at least like all the ranges of picks, just in case something comes across the table that's too good to pass up on. And so as we get to know our pick at 13, we're also really taking a close look at the players up in the top 5, top 10, whatever, just in case. And then same with move back opportunities too. Like, you try to really know the different options out there to see if, I mean, draft night is so crazy, you never really know what comes your way, to where you don't want to be caught off guard just because we focused on 13 the whole time. So I think it's how realistic it is that we could move up, I don't know, but at the same time, you don't want to not be prepared for it if it does.
I think besides he had his end of season pressure that he was pretty comfortable with the group that he had, but was keeping options open. Would a move like that signal that maybe this team is going to go in a different direction, maybe move away from some of the core players?
I mean, I don't think it would be any sort of signal of like a major directional shift, as much as just if it's something that came up where we felt whoever we're going to go get, we see them as helping the Raptors long term. What it takes to get them, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but it's definitely not something that we're seeking out to try and shift our direction one way or the other. It's just kind of more of those conversations, where they go and what it takes to have them, and then the assets that come back, if we see that as, whether it's this next season or the seasons to come, as an improvement for our team, then those are the ones that we kind of debate over and over and really give some good consideration to.
From the outside, it looks like there's a lot of playmaking in the top 8, 10 of the draft. Is that a fair assessment? Is that maybe the skill that's in most abundance in this draft?
Yeah, I think there's there's definitely a high level of on the ball playmaking. I wouldn't say a lack of shooting or anything like that, but maybe it's more playmaking than it is high end shooting, probably, in terms of the top end.
The side talk to the trade deadline that no one is serious about their offers until whatever it is, 3 o'clock. Is that the same this time of the year? Then I think Thursday night will be real.
Yeah, it definitely seems like the draft every year is. I think every team is going through that process of getting to know players so much that teams generally really fall in love with prospects, and so they hold on to picks probably longer or tighter than they normally would. And so then it's finally like once draft night comes around and those conversations become a little more real, because the deadline of draft night it has approached. It seems like similar to the trade deadline is that it kind of ignites a little bit more of a frenzy of you either do this now or you miss something, and then that's when the offers tend to go up, just because, like I said, teams fall in love with prospects and they get a little more excited to just add assets to the deal to try to make something happen.
When it comes to like the player empowerment angle of you have multiple players on your roster where it's still uncertain if they're going to be back next year or that, how does that factor into any of your decisions making on draft night?
Again, not really at all. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to overstate it that we just try to focus on the best players on the board, but we just can't make roster decisions in the draft based on the current roster, just because so much can change. And I mean, I don't think it's anything to do with really the player empowerment side of things, but it's just it doesn't really factor in much in terms of the actual draft and the players that are available.
We saw a lack of player development this past season. I think that may have factored into the coaching change. With Coach Darko coming in and bringing in a new staff as well, what are some of the changes you would like to see in the player development process?
I think we're. I wouldn't say it was a lack of player development per se in terms of like the structure in place, and we feel pretty good about our process of how we can improve players. I think we have a pretty good track record of doing it, and I don't think we necessarily forgot how to do that. And so I think everyone around here is still very confident that no matter who we bring in, or even the guys that are still on our roster, we can continue to put an emphasis on getting them better.
How does a change of head coach influence that? How change in terms of your thinking? Because obviously Darko's from outside the organization.
No, I think that's kind of a positive of bringing in someone like Darko. Is he's going to have different ideas and different perspectives of what works, and we've been doing things a certain way for quite a while now, to where having a little bit of a fresh perspective on it could go a long way of improving our process. And I don't think, like I said, we need to change a ton of it, but at the same time, having a new set of eyes and some ideas as to what can be done, I think it could actually benefit a lot.
Dan, just from a Canadian perspective, I know I think you had Leonard Miller in for a workout, and he was in the combine a year ago, and I'm just curious to see what kind of progress you've seen from him. He was pretty raw going into that process, and took his name out of the draft. So just for a guy who's got a very interesting profile, and what you've seen in the past 12 months.
I think he's shown a lot of actually really good progress with the Ignite program. I think it was a really good move for him to go there, and he got comfortable with the speed of the NBA game, and honestly just learning the the nuances of high-level basketball. Like you said, he's got a pretty interesting path to get to that point, and it was I'd say a pretty smart decision on his part to prepare him for the next step. And I mean, he played against grown men every single night, and you know, physically improved his body, and just as a skill set, you know, more so. I mean, he's still very much a raw prospect, but at the same time, like he's more comfortable playing in an NBA game than he was a year ago when he was flirting with the draft process. So yeah, I think it was probably a smart decision on his part.
When it,
You're saying that you're very confident in how you guys evaluate prospects there. How much would you say the process has changed from, say, 5 years ago? Is there maybe a key example that you can give us?
I wouldn't say much has changed, honestly. Like, if anything, just internet coverage of prospects is so much more prevalent now than a while ago. But it doesn't really change our process of how we still, you know, go out and make sure that they pass the eye test. I think analytics and the tracking data and all these different things that are out there now probably is again further along than it was in the past, and we definitely take a lot of that into account as well. But again, you know, the ultimate scouting eye test is always a big part of having a sense of if you see somebody fitting in a Raptors uniform, is going to probably weigh the most, which I'd say as far as I've been here, like that hasn't really changed our process at all.
How are discussions going right now with Fred VanVleet? And with any kind of contract there?
Oh yeah, that is not my world right now. I'm solely focused on the draft at this point. I let Masai and Bobby kind of deal with that sort of stuff, and then
Contract with Fred VanVleet changed?
again, no. I mean, none of this stuff. Again, it's free agency, and none of that changes what we do in the draft. Because again, that's just one part of the roster building process, and we're just going to bring in the best players that we can, both whether we draft them or whether we try to get them in as an undrafted player. Like, we're always targeting the guys that we think can help us.
Staying with the coverage that's changed over the past few years, some NBA organizations have hired people who do scouting on Twitter and on YouTube and all over the place. Do you guys pay attention to any of that?
Not really. I mean, I think we, yeah, the internet is a helpful tool in terms of finding information on people, but I mean to scout on YouTube and to scout on Twitter, like it's I mean, we have every resource at our disposal, and a full scouting department that will go out and see people for ourselves and not base it on what, you know, millions of people on social media are saying.
I meant more so as like from an organization looking to bring scouts in. Like, do you guys, because other organizations have picked up people based off.
Oh,
of
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
like they're okay. I mean, it's yeah, we get the amount of emails I get and you know, suggestions that are trying to get into the business. Like, there's people everywhere, and it's. I wouldn't discount anybody because of it, but at the same time, it's you know, this business is pretty tough to crack into, and if they're good at their work, I think, you know, they'll get noticed somehow, somewhere.
Do you tell them to just go into media relations and never leave your seat?
I try to not give too many career suggestions for anybody.